We're going to start whipping the look of this document into shape by quickly reviewing some universal formatting techniques that should be familiar to you as a computer user. If they're not, I suggest reviewing the Office 2010 Shared Features course, where we discuss them in more detail. Right now, though, this document has a lot of content, but it's almost impossible to make sense out of it because visually it's just one long kind of run-on piece of text. Formatting actually has several purposes, one of which is to visually organize the document so a reader can follow the flow of the content and make sense of it. Another really good reason is because we want people to read our text, and if it looks nice, is easy to follow and to read, they're more likely to do that. There are other reasons related to word functionality, but we'll get to that in the chapter on styles. For now, we're focusing specifically on one type of formatting called character or font formatting. These are things that we can do to something as small as a single character or as large as the whole document. These are really easy to find if we go to the Home tab. So we'll start off by clicking on Home and taking a specific look at the font group. Everything on the font group applies to characters or font formatting. This includes the basics like the font size, applying character features like bold, italics, or underline, even superscripts, subscripts, and the font color, those types of things. What we're going to do here is we're going to start by cleaning up the entire document and making sure that it is in the appropriate or consistent font. Let's do that by clicking anywhere in the document, doesn't matter where you click, and pressing the keyboard shortcut Control-A to select all. We're going to make sure that everything is in the same font, and we actually can tell that right now it's not because our font list is grayed out. When we select text that has kind of a mixture of things, obviously Word can't show us exactly what it is because it's more than one thing. So this is kind of a visual indicator that right now we don't have consistent formatting. We're going to click on the drop down, and we're going to choose Calibri, that is our body font. Now this is really important. Notice at the top this is under the category of theme fonts. We have one for headings, one for body. We want to choose Calibri from here, not from the actual font list, because doing it from the font list would be hard coding it. By choosing Calibri here, it's really not Calibri. It says make it whatever the body font is for the theme that is selected. That means if we choose a different theme or a different font set for our theme, all of the text that uses this font will update. If we were to select it from the list down below, then it would always be Calibri no matter what we did with the theme. This is really an important concept of working with themes and choosing the correct fonts. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll also go ahead and make sure that we set this at 11 point. We could increase or decrease the font size by using the little increase and decrease font size buttons. Now don't worry that it's not showing up in our list yet. That's okay. There's kind of an advanced thing behind that. But so far we have selected everything in our document and applied the same font and font size. So now we're just going to click anywhere in the document again, press Control Home on the keyboard, which gets us to the top, and I'm just going to scroll down using my mouse wheel, and we're going to select our actual title, because we definitely want our title to look different than the rest of the document. We're going to do this by using a couple of very simple tools. Now, if you were following along from the last lesson, your title will still be in the center of the page. As you see here, I've moved my title and contact information to be left aligned so we can work with it in this lesson. You can adjust yours as well if you would like. In my opinion, titles should kind of stand out more than body text does, and that probably means we need to make them larger. So with this selected, we can go ahead and use these increase and decrease font size buttons that are at the top of our ribbon, the big and the little a. Now the reason I use these is because sometimes we don't know how big it should be. So we're simply going to click until they look about right. And we're going to click 3 times so they become 16 point. Then we'll apply a couple of extra features, primarily B for bold and I for italics. Now these 3 buttons, bold, italics, and underline, are toggles. They're either on or off, and now you can see that we've clicked on them. They actually look like they're lit up, letting us know that those have been applied. If we were to click on them again, it would turn them off. So they are on or they are off respectively. So now these are starting to look a little bit more like titles, which is exactly what we want. A lot of times people want to change the case. In other words, they think that a title should be in all caps, for example. We have an option for that as well in the font group. By clicking on the drop down, we can change things to sentence case, where the first letter of the sentence is capitalized. We can change it to all lowercase, all uppercase. We can capitalize each word. Or if you accidentally pressed your caps lock and typed a whole bunch of text, you don't have to retype it. You can just say toggle case. Make everything that was uppercase lowercase and everything that was lowercase uppercase. We're not going to do any of those because we happen to have this exactly the way that we want. So we will just press Escape to get off of that little menu and get us back to our document. Some of the other options that we have available here, as I mentioned, is strike through, subscript, superscript. We can also add some special effects, which we'll get to in just a moment. Almost everything that we're going to use on a fairly regular basis is here. As a reminder, though, we do have the Dialog Box Launcher. Let's go ahead and give that a click because this shows us one of my favorite tools. We can change the font, the style, the size, all of these things that we've already seen on the ribbon, but there are a couple of check marks and options that are not available from the ribbon. Primarily, if we were going to underline our text, we could change the underline style from a solid line to only the words or a double underline, something like that, as well as the color of the underline. My favorite feature, though, is this checkbox that says small caps. I'm going to go ahead and give that a click, and if you look at our sample, what it does is it puts the capital letter form for everything, but our capital letters are actually still larger. I don't like using all caps. To me, that looks very old-fashioned and not very professional. But small caps really makes things like titles pop. Now, I'm not going to click this one either, but I did want to mention that we have a button called Set as Default. So if I decided that this particular set of settings was exactly what I wanted for all of my text by default, I could click this button and it would update the normal template, and then all of the text that I would start typing using that template would come in this particular format. The primary reason people would do this is if they want to change from the defaults. For example, if your company requires that you type everything in Times New Roman 12 point, you could set it for those two settings, click Set as Default, and it would override the default that comes with Office. Then you don't have to change it every time you create a new document. With that done, we'll go ahead and say OK. And we're just going to select the first line, Strategy for Organizational Success, and let's go ahead and add a special effect using the button right on the ribbon. We'll click on this drop down here. We could go through any of the gallery of options that are already set up for us, but all we want to do is a shadow. So we'll pause over shadow, and we'll choose maybe a very simple one, an offset diagonal bottom right. That's going to give kind of just a little gray shadow to our title, making it pop a little bit more. One of the tools that's available with Office 2010 that we don't want to forget is the actual mini toolbar, especially if I'm not on the Home tab. We don't want to have to go back to Home just to apply something like bold or italics. With any text selected, we can right-click, and what we'll see is this little mini toolbar that allows us to change the basic tools that we also saw right in that font group. For example, I may decide I don't want this to be italics, so I'll click the I button and remove the italics without having to go all the way up to the ribbon. If we pause for just a moment, you'll see it kind of grays out, and if we press Escape, we can get rid of it. Of course, an even faster way to use that would be to use the keyboard. So some of our common or universal shortcuts like Control-B for bold or Control-I for italics would also work as well. Those are kind of the basic and common formatting tools that Word has available that we'll also find in other applications. They work similarly in all of the Office applications. They're also the most common formatting tools we'll use. Probably a majority of the time we'll be using some of these tools, the font, the size, bold, and italics. At this point, we're able to make our document more readable and visually organized. This is kind of like hanging that drywall. It defines our rooms and the walls themselves if we can define what is a title. In this case, we've been working specifically with the title page itself. But normally we would want to come down and start adding titles in other places as well, including things like the executive summary, the table of contents that we saw at the very top of that second page, the business concept, and so forth. When we create drywall or put drywall up in a house, there certainly can be variations. There can be different textures and colors. But so far, this is basic stuff we expect to find in any document, like a house with one or more rooms that's made up of textured painted walls. That's what we're starting to create, which is going to make our document easier to navigate and easier to view. And that's what's going to be important for our readers as we move forward with additional types of formatting.